Preach the word, brother.
Good morning and thank you. Well, for those of you who haven't known, Kathy and I were in Portland the last couple of weekends, and so we weren't with you, but we were. We were on the train just outside of Oregon and listened to Sam preach 2 weeks ago, and then last week got to listen to Josh on our way back. So it was exciting to be out there in the world so far away from you and to be able to still be with you of sorts through the live streaming that we're doing now. So, but it's good to be back. Riding Amtrak was a great way to isolate ourselves traveling during the pandemic. So if you have a lot of time and you're not in a hurry, the train is a great way to go. But if you're in a hurry, forget about it. You ain't getting nowhere in a hurry. But we had a great time. Tabitha is doing well. She sends her love. And I tell you what, too, through this whole pandemic, how many of you parents have found out your children are now the parents? I tell you what, Caleb and Tabitha are so protective of us. You know, the door would open and it's like, where are you going? Kind of thing. It's like, you get in here and sit down and put your mask back on. So, wow. So it was nice to get home away from our children. And so I did learn something, though. You know me, I'm an educator. I'm a lifelong learner. I like learning new things, and I like sharing what I'm learning. And I've learned recently, it just became aware of this, why they call it COVID-19. Because 19 is about the estimate of how much weight you'll gain during this time. So I don't know if you were aware of that, but that's not been a positive side of this. Of course, there's a lot of not positive sides to this whole thing. Well, this morning, this is going to be our focus for today's lesson. And we're talking about the Great Commission in Matthew 28. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. All right, little check here. Let's just be honest. Let's just be honest. Every time this topic comes up, don't you just feel like, here we go again. One more reminder of something I'm not living up to from God's Word. One more reminder of something that I fail at. One more reminder that I'm missing the mark. I mean, let's be honest. Do you feel like that? I certainly do. I mean, out of all the things that I could point at in regards to what God directs and commands us to do, this is not my strength. It's not. You might be saying, well, why do we pay you to preach then? Well, that's always been a question, I think, for many years, but that's something else to worry about. But honestly, and I want us to think about this. There'll be a little pressure here today. You know me well enough. But as a congregation, how are we doing with this? Now, I know there's some individuals in here that have got some things going. Thank you for your example of obedience. Thank you for your example of love. But can we agree? We got to do better at this. We got to do better at spreading the gospel, at teaching people. One thing, though, that I realized a month ago today, Nathan was up here preaching. And I thought it was a great lesson. And I need to get his number from somebody so I can tell him that myself. It really was. I have really appreciated watching him grow. But one of the things that he said in that lesson that resonated with me so much and that was so powerful is that we have this responsibility to share the good news, okay? But it is not our responsibility in regards to how people respond to it, okay? That was loud and clear in Nathan's message, and I really appreciated that. Because here's what happens to me, and maybe it happens to you too. When you do have those opportunities and you are obedient to the Great Commission and you share your faith and you present the gospel to people, I don't know about you, but I become so discouraged when people don't respond to it. I mean, think about me as a preacher or any other preacher who has extended an invitation 7,312 times in their life, and 4 people have responded. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you kind of get my point. After a while, you just don't expect anybody to respond to it, and you become discouraged, and Satan uses that discouragement, and he whispers in your ear, yeah, some evangelist you are. Why do you even try? And after a while, you believe it. Oh, we never acknowledge that. Heavens no. We never confess that. At least not to each other. And Satan wins. We just stop trying. And I was really encouraged by what Nathan said, because I am obedient and pleasing to God when I create the opportunity for people to respond by sharing the gospel. Now, is it discouraging when they don't? Absolutely, especially when it's family members and such, the people that we're close to. But we can't let that discourage us. And we have to realize, even though the Great Commission in Matthew 28, as we refer to it, talks about the teaching part of it, we have to realize, unless we're presenting the gospel, we never create the opportunity to do the teaching part of it. So it's got to start with the sharing of our faith. So let's not get bogged down in the frustration that often happens, I think anyways, from this perspective of the congregation, me looking out at you, that like, oh, here we go again. I'm just going to be disciplined for not being obedient enough. So today's lesson is about, I think something has evolved for us that we can be victorious in fulfilling God's expectations in regards to our faith, in regards to the Great Commission. Today, I want to share with you a wonderful opportunity that has developed for us because of COVID-19. And I think many of us are aware of this, but we need to be intentional, okay? We need to be intentional. You know, as I already mentioned, a month ago, Nathan was talking to us about this responsibility, and I was encouraged by Sam's excitement of reminding us in his lesson the week after that about the excitement of being in the family of God. You know, I really appreciated that, and we need to help others experience that excitement. And last week, Joshua told us that this is one of those ways that we grow, right, Josh? Did I hear that right? By fulfilling this Great Commission. So there's just blessings all the way around here, and taking advantage of this opportunity that has evolved for us here at Cedar Lou because of COVID-19. And this opportunity is a practical way for us to share our faith. And I think one of the things that we're struggling with too is we're old. Okay? Let me just let that sink in a little bit. And what we have to understand about that is we've had a life of experiences that has brought us to this point, and a certain way in which we think. It's not right or wrong. I mean, even our elders realized that and brought in a special speaker for us from Sunset, Matt Clowie, to talk to us about those generational differences. I'm not sure if we've done anything with that yet, to be perfectly honest, but we need to. And what is evolved for us in this worship experience because of COVID, I think, is the perfect opportunity to speak a more similar, familiar, and comfortable language to a younger generation. Okay? That is more computer savvy than we will ever be. And so we need to tap into that language that they hear, that language that they speak. And we can do that. We can absolutely do that. So, if you haven't figured out what I'm talking about yet, let me try to clarify that for us. Because of COVID-19, we were forced to do some things we didn't want to. Just look around. None of us wanted this. None of us wanted this. But I remember sitting in an elders meeting, a Zoom meeting, and the elders are struggling with, wow, everything's getting shut down. What are we going to do? And I suggested, well, we could Zoom worship. And we talked about that, and we did that. And we did that for a while. And then as things started opening back up, and we were anxious to get back together, we figured that out. And I appreciate the work that the elders did to become informed and to think about what are the appropriate mitigation strategies we need to put in place to be able to gather, realizing that not everybody, there's a lot of empty chairs here, even though there's only half of, a guess of the amount of chairs we usually have, there's still a lot of empty chairs. We got a lot of people still not comfortable being back here. My wife is one of them. And so we figured out, hey, what about live streaming? And so that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. So we've learned we got to do some things differently, and we learned that we can do some things differently. Now, I want to make this point too. Think about the church when it began. We make a big deal, and I'm not making light of that. We make a big deal about following biblical patterns, and we should. It's a big deal. There's a reason it's recorded for us. We make a big deal about following that first century example. And of course, I frequently remind us, what's Acts chapter 2 say? Are we really following that example? I think that's a responsibility that I have as a preacher to hold that pattern, that example before us, so that we can say, okay, we could do better. And this is an opportunity for that to happen. But did that first century congregation have this? And I'm talking about this literally, the Bible. They certainly had the Word of God. Where did they get their Word of God? The apostles, right? So how did worship change when hundreds and hundreds of years later, everybody had this, or at least had access to it? And now today, you can get it for free. It's on the internet, and you can absolutely get it free. So what I'm saying to you is there have been numerous times in the life of the church where the method of communication and study has changed, has evolved, if you will, if you're comfortable with that word, directly connected to what is happening in the world. It was the invention of the printing press that made this possible, okay? Nothing that any congregation did, but the church was blessed because of that. Is this one of those opportunities again for us? To have a method, a means, a format, so that we can more accurately and reach more people as well with this method of communication. It absolutely is that. It absolutely is that. So those of you who may be feeling, and really who isn't feeling some angst about all of this, realize the church has been through changes before when it comes to communication, mobility, the ability to reach more and more people. And we're there again. Actually, we've been here for a while. But for now, for us now, Cedarloo, this is our time. We also learn that we can connect with people in ways we have never thought about as a congregation. I mean, we never thought about doing this, at least seriously enough to do it until COVID. And what a blessing it has been. We are now live streaming our worship service as a service to our members. I thought that was great when I first tuned in and the day that Sam was preaching and I'm on the train and I'm watching the video service and it's just great. One of the advantages of being online is the chat box. So I put a message in the chat box saying, hey, everybody, Rudy and I, or Kathy and I are on our way to Portland, but we're with you right now through the internet. And then Colleen jumps on and says, hey, everybody, I'm homesick today, so glad to be with you. And I thought, that's great. That is absolutely great that could happen. Just because you're sick, you don't have to necessarily miss this assembly as you join us virtually. I thought it was a great experience. But think about that when we first started. Think about all the people that were joining us back when we started Zooming. The Burks, okay? They're in Arkansas, right? We had people from Omaha joining us. We had, one of Colleen's sons joined us a couple of times. I think Bible study and then worship. The Candio High congregation joined us. Did I say Omaha? We had several people out of Omaha. I mean, it was amazing how many people we were able to connect with. Yeah, Minnesota, the Candio High. Yep, thank you. Would that have happened without it? Would that have happened without COVID-19? You see, COVID-19 was driving us to make that decision, and it just created an opportunity that I don't think any of us expected. All right, let me share some exciting news with you. This past week, I've gotten 3 emails. One from a couple, it was Laura and Nick. Laura and Nick reached out and said, hey, what are you guys doing now? And I feel like when we made that switch from Zoom to live stream, we lost some people, and we need to cast the net back out there and capture those people and help them find us where we're at now on the internet. So I gave them the information, and they were just that was just one example of some folks that are just so appreciative of what's going on. But what I'm really excited about is the Candio High Church of Christ in Candio High, Minnesota, sent me an email this past week. And they said, Rudy, as you know, and I've kept in touch with them, so of course I knew this, the last couple of years, they haven't had a preacher. They can't afford to pay a full-time person. When I was there, I brought my own support from the Faith Village congregation in Wichita Falls, Texas. But when I left, that support came to an end. And for several years, they were able to find men who were willing to come in and basically do full-time work at part-time pay. But the last couple of years, they haven't been able to do that. Well, they made the decision, or are having the conversation right now about using our live stream for their worship service to meet their preaching needs. And I'm so excited about that because I think I've shared this with you before. It has always been my retirement dream to go back to Candio High and preach. And so I get to do it. I get to do it through this live stream, and I'm really excited about that. But did any of us expect anything like that happening from this, where all of a sudden we're helping to meet the needs, not just of our own congregation, but other congregations? I'm excited about that, and I need you to be excited about that because this is an opportunity that could make a difference for some people. We have found an answer to the problem that many people have when it comes to visiting a congregation. You are scary people. We are. To people who don't have a relationship with God like we do through Jesus Christ, we are scary people. And to invite people to come and check us out, how's that working for us? I know you're extending some invitations, as I do too. But if you're like me, you live in Independence and work in Delaware County, even farther away. You want me to drive how long to come to church? There's plenty of churches right here in Manchester that I can go to. But you see, that was another blessing. When we started Zooming, some of those people that I work with, dear friends that I work with, joined us for worship. Doors opening again. Do you hear those doors opening for us, Cedarloo? Because they absolutely are. I think it's even scarier for younger generations, those millennials and generation, what's the one next after that, below that, Xers? I can't even keep them all straight. They are so used to the social media platform. Now that we are developing a footprint there, they'll come and check us out there. And what we have to believe is as we do that, as we create a larger footprint and do a better job of directing people to resources to dig deeper, we create an opportunity for faith to be born. And when faith grows and as learning continues, people will learn how important the fellowship side of it is. And now that I have a picture, an image, and I've heard what it sounds like, it's not as scary. I know what to expect when I come in now. And it's not as scary. That is a great opportunity. How many times have you heard that commercial? Opportunity knocking. Are we going to answer the door? That's what I'm challenging us with today. Are we going to answer that door with this opportunity before us? This is indeed a great tool that we have. And I just want to lay some things out here for us that we need to consider. We need to advertise this. We need to get the word out. So people who are well connected to us, like Laura and Nick, can find us, as well as those who aren't connected to us. So how do we do that? Are we still doing house to house? I'm honestly not sure. It needs to be in that. What about putting something in the newspaper? What about, and we absolutely need to do this, redevelop our website so that our website is driving people to our YouTube site and that our YouTube site drives people to our internet. Because that's where this younger generation, this social media savvy group of people, which isn't us, that may be Josh, are accustomed to and comfortable with. See, we're not comfortable with it. We're not. At least I'm not. Okay? But this younger generation is. And if we don't present it to them in a platform that they're comfortable with, what's the future for us as a congregation? I mean, we're already getting an inkling of it. What are our numbers doing? I mean, let's just be honest. What are our numbers doing? They're not growing, are they? But what are we doing to change that? That's what this is about. That's what this is about, okay? We need to, as I already mentioned, we need to update our website. Our current preacher candidate told us that as kindly as he could, you know. He let us know it's not very impressive. And, you know, how many of you have even looked at it? Or the last time you looked at it was 3 years ago, okay? I do want to say this to you, too. If you haven't checked us out on YouTube yet, do it. Especially if you're somebody who's involved with the worship services, you need to see what it looks like. You need to hear what it feels like, okay? Don't just take the word of somebody else who's watching it. you need to experience that. And all of our sermons, all of our worship services are recorded on there and are available. So it's not that you have to chime in at the live time. You can look at the recordings and you'll have that same experience. Check it out if you haven't, especially if you're going to invite somebody else to check it out, you better have seen it. So you know what you're inviting them to. So you can answer their questions. So you can help them to anticipate what it really is. And I think, too, by watching it and looking at it, it will help us to know what do we need to do to polish it so it comes across as effectively as it possibly can. Is that going to have an influence on some things we do here together? Absolutely. But if it's for the right reason, reaching across, because here's the reality. We have done absolutely nothing except within our membership to promote this. And on some days, we've had a larger internet viewing than we've had here. And honestly, I kind of expected that. Think of what's going to happen when we start promoting it. It's going to explode. It will explode if we do it right. We need to develop ways to extend invitations that aren't threatening to people. I think I shared this idea with you once before, but I came across, and I think it was on YouTube, I came across a story about a congregation that realized the great fear that people have when they're invited to visit a church. It's different when it's family kind of thing. I'm not talking about that. When we're doing legitimate outreach and trying to get somebody here. How many of you can remember the first time, especially if you weren't raised in the church, that you visited Church of Christ? I can. It was weird. It was weird to me. It was different. That's why it was weird. It was different. Now, I felt welcomed, and it's kind of interesting. The first Church of Christ I ever visited was in Rochester, the 2nd Street congregation, where years later I would preach my first sermon. I would be baptized. And that was pretty cool how it all came around. But we need to develop ways. And what I started to say is the story of this congregation, what they did is they developed like a calling card, a business card. And on that card, it had all the information that people needed to know to be able to find them on the internet. And the invitation now wasn't so much, hey, why don't you come and be uncomfortable and worship with a group of people that you've never met before? Because that's a good time. It said, hey, check us out. You got some questions? Looking for some answers? Go here on the internet. Here's my name. After you check it out and you got some questions, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever it is. And they had quite a bit of success. And now as they approach people, and they did cold calls this way, as they approached people, they said, they had the standard line, kind of thing is, hey, are you looking for a church family? If you are, check us out. No big pressure, no big anything, except an invitation that might change their life. And now they can comfortably, on their own, in a way that's not threatening, jump into the material. Jump into the resources that the congregation has made available, which also directed them and encouraged them to join them physically. And they've had a lot of success with it. That might be a possibility for us. I'm just suggesting, how are we going to do this? How are we going to extend invitations, not just to our members? We don't need to convert our members. Do we? No. How are we going to get the word out? That's what we need to be thinking about. We need to show people how to find us on YouTube. So when Laura reached out to me via email, I gave her some directions and I told her, said, hey, if you're having any problems, let me know. I mean, I'll drive up to Old Wine and sit down at their computer and show them how to do that. And if that's what we need to do, that's exactly then what we need to do. So again, I'm inviting you to step up and help us as a congregation to meet these needs as we work to faithfully fulfill the command given to us in Matthew 28 that we refer to as the Great Commission. Let me come back here. We need to be intentional, right? I loved it years ago when Jace first started throwing that word at us because it really resonated with me and it still does. Have you ever accomplished anything without being intentional about it? Maybe, but it was luck. It was luck. But I got to tell you, if you set reasonable goals and you're intentional about it, there isn't anything you can't accomplish. And as I say to you, as I call to you to be a part of this, there's a lot of this you can just do on your own, but I'm calling us as a congregation to think about how we can do an intentional job about this. You know, Jace was very intentional about the jail ministry. And I got to be honest, as his work was honestly quite successful and we had a lot of people coming, I knew I would get frustrated when all of a sudden these contacts, and I know this sounds so cold, but as these new friends of ours were coming and then all of a sudden stopped going, I was very discouraged by that. And I think some of you were too. And I think that's a good example of this idea of I'm taking responsibility for your obedience. And so when you fail, it brings me down. And I think Satan uses that very well. But then I'm reminded a month ago as Nathan is preaching, I'm like, wow, if Jace hadn't been intentional about that, Nathan wouldn't be a preacher now. You know, come on, can I get an amen on that? My word. What, how exciting was that? So I'm wondering how many other preachers might be out there that we can reach if we're just intentional about it. This is a big thing. And so it reminds me of the question, how do you eat an elephant? You know, the old answer is, one bite at a time. Elmer Baldwin, one of the church members back at the Columbus Church of Christ in Columbus, Nebraska, used to have a saying. He said, if you go out and hammer one board up every day, eventually you'll have a house. He's absolutely right. And I have at least a dozen projects around my house that if I would just commit to doing something with some of those projects every day, I could get some of those things off my honey-do list. But I haven't been intentional about it. I haven't committed to it. It's an overwhelming task, but a little bit done with some frequency can go a long way. We're talking about planting seeds of faith, right? How quick does your garden grow? Does it come up the next day? Are you like me when you plant a seed, you go out there every day and you look for the sprouts? You look for those plants to start growing, and it's so exciting. So what happens when you ignore your garden? Well, we know exactly what happens. The weeds take over and production goes down with your fruits and vegetables, and there's nothing good that comes out of it when we ignore it. But I've learned, though, from gardening, is if I do a little bit, even a little bit every day or with some frequency, it makes a big difference. At Tabitha's house that she's living in, the front yard, and this is kind of unique in Portland, Most homes don't have grass like we do in our yards. They just fill them up with flowers, especially if they have these small yards, like a lot of the Portland neighborhoods do, and they're just flowers, and there's no mowing. But the front yard became overgrown, and it was looking a little rough. And I did my job. I sat on the porch, and I supervised Tabitha and Kathy. And they pulled one weed at a time, one overgrown flower at a time. And I wish I had before and after pictures to show you because it was pretty impressive. But they just kept doing it and kept doing it, kept going and kept going and kept going. And before you know it, wow. Beautiful flowers were revealed that had been covered up with the overgrowth and different things like that. So I was just encouraged to think about that a little bit at a time with some frequency makes huge, huge difference. You know, leaving my garden for a week and counting on others to care for my garden has never been good. In fact, this year, because I knew our trip to Portland was going to be longer than years past, I didn't even put a garden in because I thought, I didn't want to put that responsibility on somebody else. And I didn't want to come home to a garden that was, well, what was the weather this past week? Heard you guys had some heat. You know, well, we were in Portland, mid-60s, low 70s, no humidity. It was great. It did get hot, though, after we left, so Tabitha appreciated that. Evangelism is like cultivating. And the definition of cultivating is basically whatever we can do to prepare the soil, whether it's tilling the soil up, planting good seed, removing weeds, watering it, all that is cultivating. And so what are we cultivating as a congregation? The short answer here, again, a little bit done with frequency goes a long way to promote growth. So the question that I just asked, what are we cultivating in our lives? And I want us to think about that as a congregation. Because if we're not doing anything as a congregation in regards to outreach, what should our expectation be? And if that's true about us, that we're not doing anything, I want us to realize we're cultivating something. But it's not what we want to grow. And we need to be aware of that in our lives, too, to make a personal application, is if we're not putting God first in our lives, we are cultivating something else because it's growing, it's taking root in our lives, and it will affect our hearts, it will affect our thinking, it will affect the interaction that we have with each other and the rest of the world. It's a serious question, and we need to answer it individually and as a congregation. What are we growing? Or what are we not growing? Again, we have to be intentional. Being intentional requires a plan. And a plan success is based on successfully following that plan. Okay? So again, what's our plan? I mean, I say that, and I know what the answer is, but I'm trying to make a point here. And the response to that is, well, we don't have one right now, but we're gonna. Because God commands us to. Matthew 28. This passage came to my mind, too, as I was creating this lesson from Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Now, God didn't bring around a pandemic to bless us. What this teaches us that is no matter what happens, God can bring good things out of it. And I'm suggesting to us what we were forced to do because of a pandemic is an awesome opportunity for us to be faithful to Matthew 28 in ways we haven't been as a congregation in a long time. But I want to encourage you too. If you think about some of the things that have been accomplished in this congregation in the last 10 years, the jail ministry that I referred to earlier, One man purposed in his heart and was intentional about it. Okay? Trips to Christmas Island. One man had the idea and the purpose in his heart and shared the idea with the elders, Ron Burke, and voila, look what happened. Some amazing outreach experiences for many, really for all of us in the congregation, just in different ways. And the same thing can happen here as well. I mean, I want to give a shout out to Russ again for all the work that he has done to make this possible. You know, from our perspective, it looks like it was pretty easy peasy. Russ, quit whining. That was easy. That wasn't. It was a lot of work and study and trial and error. And Russ literally put hours upon hours, days after days, to get us to the point we're at. And again, so look at it. Get on YouTube and look at it. And by the way, if you don't know how to do that, you go to YouTube, just put that in your browser. See, and some of you don't even know what I'm talking about. See, that's what I mean. But you type that, YouTube, and you go to Google, type in YouTube. There you go. That'll get you where you need to be. And then in YouTube, just search Cedarloo Church of Christ. And you'll find us. And then bookmark that if you know how to do that. If you don't, let me know. I will come to your house and set it up for you. I'll be glad to do that. But again, something so terrible that is taking the lives of thousands and thousands of people has brought us to a point where we can save the lives. Could it be thousands and thousands? That's what I'm going to pray for. So, that's it. I realize something though too. As I extend to you the invitation, I want to say to you, we're listening. That's what the invitation's about. To listen to your needs. So if you have needs, we're going to invite you up here to share those needs. And I want to explain to people, if you've joined us on YouTube today, we're going to cut away. Because we've made that decision that when people respond to the invitation, it's probably not something we want to broadcast to the world, people's personal problems. But if you're on YouTube listening to us right now, there's am I pointing to the right place, Russ? There's my email address. Email me your needs. Email me your prayer concerns. And I will pray for you. I will share. If there's a way that you need more than that, just communicate that in the email. Because we want you to be able to respond too. We want you to be a part of glorifying God in what we're doing here at Cedarloo. And so we appreciate you joining us today. But if you're here now in this audience and you have a need, this invitation is for you. And I'll tell you what, if you're not comfortable with coming forward, email me. Email me. I would love to minister to you today or sometime this week. But right now, if you have the need, won't you come while together we stand and sing the song of encouragement.